Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're diving into a captivating manhwa called A Kind Intruder. Imagine being childhood friends, growing up together, and then suddenly living under the same roof. What happens when one night changes everything? The tension, the emotions, and the secrets make this story truly unmissable. I'm so glad you're here again, and I hope you enjoy this recap. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. It really helps the channel grow and keeps you updated with all the latest recaps. Let's jump in! What are the chances they'll ever see each other as a man and a woman? Pretty much zero. But if maybe that ever happened, then they really shouldn't see each other again. It was a beautiful sunny day. The weather was absolutely amazing. On one of the streets stood a big, lovely house that belonged to a wonderful girl. A girl named Jung Yihan was sitting at home, staring at her computer, praying she would pass. Today, the university admission results were supposed to come out. If she failed, how would she ever look her aunt and uncle in the eyes? Even thinking about it scared her. Jung Yihan was very responsible, and she was especially worried because of Chioh. He definitely wouldn't go easy on her, and she would also feel terribly ashamed in front of her mom and older brother, even though they were in heaven. The tragedy happened in February, 11 years ago. Her mother and brother died in a car accident. Because of sudden snow, the bus lost control and crashed into their car. The girl was only 9 at the time. She was left alone in that big house and has lived there by herself ever since, due to complicated circumstances. The only reason she managed to cope and survive until today was the family living next door. The girl decided she'd had enough dark thoughts. She needed to leave the past behind. Things would work out somehow. Nervously waiting at her computer, Ihan kept refreshing, but the results weren't coming. And then finally, she saw it. She was accepted into the university. Her joy knew no bounds. She threw on her clothes and ran to the neighbor's house, calling for her aunt, uncle, and Chioh. Bursting into the house, she happily announced that she got accepted. Her aunt and uncle, who were in the kitchen, couldn't believe their eyes and were genuinely happy for her. Her aunt asked in disbelief if it was really true. Her uncle said he had never once doubted their little girl and wiped away a tear. Her aunt scolded him, saying it's such a wonderful day and he's already crying. Her aunt told Ihan she did an amazing job and couldn't imagine how proud they were of her. The girl thanked them, thinking they truly were happy for her. She asked where her oppa was, but he quietly came up from behind and asked if she was looking for him. She tried to say something, but he grabbed her by the chin and said that from now on, she was his junior. He looked at Ihan warmly. He was genuinely happy for her and congratulated her on getting in. The girl shyly thanked him. Then she hugged her aunt, because these people were the only ones who had always supported her. 11 years ago, on that tragic night in the big house, the little girl was completely alone. She was sad and terrified. But beside her was the neighbor's boy, who always supported her. Ihan was devastated. She cried constantly, because after losing her family in the accident, she had no one left. The boy tried to comfort her, telling her she wasn't alone. He would always stay by her side. And then he told her he would love her even more than her mom and dad did, so everything would be okay. From that day on, Chioh, who was 2 years older, started taking care of her like she was his real little sister. When his parents learned what happened to the girl, they took pity on her and welcomed her into their family. His mother told her to start calling her Mom. The girl began living in her new family. She felt warm and safe, and thanks to Chioh, her world slowly came back together. The boy's parents loved Jung Yihan dearly. When she came over to tell them she got into university, they said she must not have eaten anything while waiting, so they prepared all her favorite dishes. The girl was touched and surprised. They told her not to stand out in the cold and to come inside. Even if she only ran next door, she still needed to stay warm. Ihan thought about how much Chioh's parents worked just to make her happy with her favorite food, and she felt a little embarrassed. But then her eyes stopped on a room filled with boxes, and she wondered what all that was. When they sat at the big table, she asked how they even managed to cook so much so quickly. They told her there was plenty of food, so she should eat slowly. Chioh was shocked and said that when he got into university, his parents only gave him a postcard. His father told him not to compare. His mom offered Yihan some ribs, her favorite, and she thanked her, saying they were delicious. Yihan told them they really didn't have to go through all this trouble for her. She should be the one thanking them for everything. Chioh smiled at her and said she should be thanking him, since she got into university thanks to his help. She said he was starting again. Though he wasn't wrong, much of her success was thanks to him. Chioh got into university with the top exam results, but for some reason enlisted in the army immediately after. She still didn't understand why. She was only 18 then. He told her she planned to apply to his department anyway, so it would be boring for her to go to college alone. If she passed everything well, they'd study together when he returned. That's why she worked so hard. He used to be so quiet and mature, but now she couldn't understand what was going on in his head. Her uncle told Yihan not to say things like that. They were one family, and this wasn't a burden. It was their way of caring for her. And no matter what anyone said, she had always been and would always be their youngest daughter. She blushed and thanked them, and she realized she kept grumbling while they were just sincerely caring for her. Yihan kept eating happily, thinking her hard work was worth it. When she got a job, she would pay them back. No, she needed to do even more. Chioh watched her, wondering where she even put all that food. His mom told her not to rush or she'd choke. The girl paused and then asked if they were renovating again. It seemed like they'd just finished one. Her auntie looked at her with a sad expression, as if she had something important to tell her. Ihan stared at them. Their faces had suddenly turned gloomy. Holding her hand, the woman said that even if they ended up far apart, she knew they would still remain a family. They always considered her their daughter. The girl was overjoyed to hear that and said she always thought of them as her parents too. But her auntie told her that this was exactly why they felt so sorry. Ihan couldn't understand anything. Then the woman explained that they were moving the next day. She reminded her of the grandmother who lives in Busan and hasn't been feeling well this year. It seemed they had no other choice but to move in with her. They had wanted to tell Yihan earlier, but were afraid it would be too hard on her, so they kept postponing it. After everyone finished eating, the girl went to her oppa's room, knocking on the door and asked if she could come in. Chioh looked at her, not understanding why she came to him of all people, but told her to come inside. When she entered his room, she saw that his things were also already packed and standing by the closet. The guy pretended he wasn't paying attention to her. Ihan sat next to him, unsure how to start the conversation. She thought that when they were all together, everything felt fine. But the moment they were alone, she always felt uncomfortable. She finally gathered the courage to ask him whether he wasn't planning to return to the university right away. She assumed he must have already applied for reinstatement. He answered yes, while continuing to play on his phone. The girl remembered how he had once said they would definitely study together. Yet now he was acting like he didn't care at all. She thought that those words must have been empty, and she was stupid for taking them seriously. Like always, the girl had always felt lonely, so wanting to be close to him was probably just her own stubborn fantasy. The guy stood up from the bed, pulled her chair closer to himself, and asked her to go ahead and say whatever she wanted to say. Yihan became flustered and said she didn't want to say anything. He looked at her silently for a moment, then told her he wasn't going to eat her. He smiled, trying to understand her mood, and then said she must be sad that he'd be leaving soon. Then he suddenly asked her if she wanted them to live together. The girl never expected him to suggest something like that. He sat there looking at her attentively. His question was unexpected, yet he was clearly waiting for an honest answer. Yihan couldn't bring herself to answer, knowing he probably already knew what her answer would be. She had grown up so kind and considerate that she simply didn't know how to want something just for herself. Yihan told him that they weren't even a real family, and the fact that he had taken care of her all this time was already more than enough. Chioh gently patted her head and said that if they weren't a real family, that he shouldn't have brought it up at all. He apologized to her, but she was so anxious that she felt he completely misunderstood what she meant. He turned around and walked out of the room. The girl thought that of course she wanted to live with him, but even if she said it out loud, nothing would change. She really didn't want to be left alone again. She wondered if everything would really end tomorrow and she'd return to living in that cold house, filled with nothing but ringing silence. She had always felt lonely at school, too, since she had no friends and always had to sit alone. Ihan kept remembering her auntie's words, that even if they were far apart, they would still remain a family. Thinking about the way she used to live before, the girl realized that family wasn't about distance. Being left alone meant becoming truly lonely. After telling Chioh they weren't a family, she thought that wasn't what she meant at all. She was just hurt that she knew nothing about what was happening, and the words slipped out. Everything had already been decided, and her words wouldn't change anything anyway, so she thought it was pointless to bring it up again. The girl told Chioh that if it were possible, she really would want them to live together. She didn't expect she would be able to say it out loud. As soon as she voiced that secret wish, the tight anxiety she'd been carrying suddenly began to loosen, as if saying it out loud might actually make it come true. She thought that Oppa was probably tired of someone like her. But he told her she did great, which surprised her. She had no idea what he meant. He told her she needed to speak her desires out loud, then gently ran his hand through her hair. Chioh said that sometimes she needed to stop being afraid and allow herself to want something, and that she wasn't a burden to him at all. Yihan looked completely confused and thought that the guy was, as always, more mature than she was. He leaned toward her and told her not to make people anxious for no reason. The girl was startled and wished he would just forget what she'd said earlier. He thought for a moment and said that if his youngest was asking so persistently, then he had no choice. She didn't understand anything and asked him what he meant. As he walked out of the room, he said she'd find out tomorrow. In the morning, his parents told Yihan that Chioh had explained everything to them the night before. They asked her to take good care of him. The girl asked what exactly he told them, but the mom said that thanks to Yihan, she was finally at peace. Then she added that if everything was loaded, they could head out. They said they had decided that Chioh would live with Yihan at her place. His mom added that they were grateful she was taking this troublesome guy under her wing. His parents got into the car, smiled, and told them to eat well, and if the guy started acting up, she should kick him out. They also asked them to visit sometimes, and said they already missed their dear Yihan. They said they would text when they arrived, and Chioh told them to send his greetings to Grandma. The girl stood there completely lost, not understanding what was happening. She asked him what all of this meant. Was this because of the conversation they had yesterday? The guy looked at her and asked why she was making that face, reminding her that she was the one who wanted to live together. He smiled at the bewildered girl and told her to take very good care of him. Home is a strange place. It seems like it's just a space closed off by four walls. But once you fill it with warmth, familiar voices, and the smell of dinner, it becomes a real home. But for Yihan, it was just an empty place, something she could never fill again. She had forgotten what it felt like to live with someone. She stood there, staring at Chioh in confusion, while he repeated that she needed to take good care of him. She didn't understand why she was supposed to take care of him. Chioh answered that she herself had said yesterday that if she had the chance, she would want them to live together. When she said she wanted them to live together, she actually meant everyone, her uncle and aunt, too. She wanted all of them to stay together. But Chioh said that he understood it as her not wanting to part specifically with him, meaning that now she was kicking him out. The girl thought, who in the world would interpret it like that? The girl became very upset and said she never said anything like that at all. The guy suggested they go home and talk calmly. She was very surprised and didn't know what to say to him. When they reached the front door, the girl told him that she didn't agree. She hesitated for a long time and didn't want to open the door, but the guy asked her to open it. She said she didn't want to. Chioh smiled and asked if she was hiding something dangerous in there, or maybe she had a boyfriend inside. Yihan said there was nothing like that, and if anything, she thought, the most suspicious person here was Oppa himself. The guy leaned toward her and asked if she knew that ever since middle school, he had never once been inside her house. He said that, just as he promised, he always waited for her to invite him herself, but she never did. And now, with everything turning out like this, he even felt a little hurt. The girl stood frozen by the door, not knowing what to do. She hesitated for a long time, but eventually opened the door and said it wasn't that she didn't want to. She simply couldn't bring herself to invite him. The guy asked in surprise why and what that was supposed to mean. But the girl told him not to be offended. When he entered the house, the guy was shocked. The rooms felt like a space where loneliness was compressed under the roof. It was a place where everything that was missing became painfully obvious. Everything was white and cold, frightening, and reminded him of Jung Yihan herself. He looked around in disbelief and asked if this was really all she had. The girl smiled and said that yes, it looked empty, but at least it was easy to clean. When you live alone, you don't need much. Chioh said that if she truly thought this was normal, then something was wrong either with her or with him. In childhood, everything here used to be different. The girl was very surprised and asked if he really remembered what this house used to look like. When she was little, she didn't know what to do with everything. And when she finally pulled herself together, she realized almost nothing useful was left. So she just threw everything out. The girl said that's just how it happened. Although Yijun's room was perfectly fine, and only her desk had a little mess on it. The guy asked if he was supposed to praise her for that, and the girl said yes. Chioh asked if his parents knew about all this, and said that those two must have conspired behind his back, knowing he would only grumble anyway. Ihan said they knew everything, and he should have seen how they helped her throw things away. His parents thought they didn't do anything wrong. Then he told her to just forget everything he'd said earlier. The girl asked why he was saying that. He answered that the more emptiness there is, the more there is to fill. And he actually liked it that way. She stared at him and even forgot why he came. The guy asked why it was so cold in her house. Then the girl asked in confusion why he even decided to stay here, since he planned to continue his academic leave. Wasn't that right? Chioh said he never said anything like that, and she made it up herself. Was that really true? The girl wondered, and asked what his parents had said. They were actually happy about it. His dad said they worried a lot because Ihan lived completely alone, and now that they were together, they felt much more at ease. And his mom still worried and told him just not to bother the girl too much. The girl thought that wasn't surprising. The guy said that right now there were no free rooms near the university at all. Everything was taken by freshmen, and the cheap apartments were either in basements or in horrible condition. Then the guy walked up to one of the doors and asked if this was Yijun's room. The girl tried to stop him, but he asked if he could live in it. The room was very big and bright. It was clean and tidy. Looking around such a beautiful room, the guy was surprised. Everything in this room was perfectly in order, not a speck of dust. Then he found a medal, picked it up, and asked if it was real gold. He said it looked like real gold, and the girl stood watching him closely. Chioh examined the medal for a long time, then put it in his mouth to try whether it was real gold. When the girl saw that, she remembered her younger brother, who once also put his medal in his mouth to see if it was real gold. Her brother had been very disappointed and said it was fake, even though his coach told him it was real gold. He thought the coach must have lied to him. Chioh looked at Ihan and asked what she was thinking about, since she looked so surprised. The girl said, "Nothing," then took the medal from his hands and told him he wasn't a child to be putting everything in his mouth. Chioh said he was simply curious about everything, then sat in the chair and said it suited him perfectly. The guy remembered that Yijun used to be quite strong as a kid. The girl also remembered her brother and felt a bit. Yihan was very nervous and told the guy that she was going to say this for the last time. Chioh looked at her carefully and asked what she wanted to say. Yihan gathered her courage again and said they couldn't live together. It'll look weird to anyone. The guy looked at her and told her not to worry, because no one would think anything like that. Even if that was true, the girl was still worried because she was already 20 and an adult. They would study at the same university, in the same department. What if someone saw them? And even though they had been close since childhood, they weren't real siblings. And besides, he would feel uncomfortable too. But the guy was confused as to why he would feel that way. He was very surprised that she would feel uncomfortable, because he had never felt uncomfortable around her. The girl became very upset and started yelling that she was being serious and he should listen to her. And the guy agreed. Chioh said there was no need to worry at all, and asked what the chances were that they would ever see each other as a man and a woman. Absolutely zero. The girl stood in the middle of the room, staring out the window, then said, "And what if it did happen?" Then she stepped closer to him and asked again, "What if suddenly, just suddenly, something like that happened?" And the guy answered that in that case, it would be better for them never to see each other again. If she was Yejeon's younger sister, then she was his too. And they needed to keep clear boundaries. The girl thought about how easily he said they should just stop seeing each other. She was shocked to hear those words from him. If they were a real family, such words would never have slipped from his mouth so casually. The guy looked at the girl with gentle eyes, then took her hand and asked what her answer was. The girl still didn't know what to say to him, then asked him to forgive her, and said that no matter how close they were, she didn't think it was possible. Chioh thought for a moment, then said that at least until he found a place to live. His gaze was so convincing, and he asked whether that was possible considering their relationship. The girl looked at his bag standing by the bed and asked if that was all his stuff, but the guy replied that he'd left most of it at home for now. Ihan told him to unpack everything then, and said she'd step out. He should call her if he needed anything. Leaving the room, the girl was extremely anxious and wondered what she had just done, and whether she was really going to live with Chioh now. The more she thought about it, the more she realized she had agreed way too easily. And maybe it wasn't too late to tell him she changed her mind. But where would he go if she kicked him out now? Maybe this whole situation seemed complicated only to her. Then she remembered what the guy had said, that if anything happened between them, they should never see each other again. She calmed down a little and told herself she wouldn't make things complicated. After all, Chioh was Yejeon's friend, and he was almost like a real brother to her. She would just pretend nothing had happened while he stayed with her. She decided she would consider it her way of repaying Chioh for everything he had done for her. He'd find a place to live soon anyway. Then she decided to return to his room and thought it wasn't the time to overthink. She should help him unpack. Trying to be very polite, the girl walked into the room with a smile and asked Chioh if she could help him with anything. But seeing that the guy was changing clothes, annoyed the girl felt incredibly awkward and froze in embarrassment. The guy was changing, and when he turned toward the door, he saw Yihan standing there silently, staring at him. He walked up to her with a shirt in his hand and asked in surprise what had happened. Chioh continued dressing, and the girl thought she should have knocked before entering. She apologized for barging in so suddenly. The guy stood there looking at the flustered girl. The shirt he was holding slipped from his hands and fell onto the floor. The girl tried to help and bent down to pick up the shirt, but she stumbled and almost fell. The guy caught her and pulled her close. He asked again what had happened, seeing how confused she was and how she struggled to answer. The girl didn't know where to look from embarrassment and said, "She simply wanted to help him." Then she asked why he was undressed at all, but the guy replied that someone had barged in without knocking, and she apologized again. Chioh explained that the house was a bit chilly, so he wanted to change into something with long sleeves. Yihan said it was probably because she rarely turned on the boiler and now it heated slowly. She thought it all turned out so awkward. The guy started getting dressed and said she was funny. After all, when they were kids, they saw each other many times, so why was she so startled now? They used to go to the beach every summer until middle school. The girl agreed, but said that still, she said that now everything was different. The guy tried to button his shirt and didn't understand what she meant. Picking up his things from the floor, the girl apologized again and said she'd be more careful in the future, then thought she should leave as soon as possible. The tall, handsome guy looked at the flustered girl and asked if she really thought the two of them were different now. The girl looked at him and said that wasn't what she meant at all, and she wasn't even talking about them. Chioh smiled and asked, if not about them, then about who? And the girl thought she might have offended him a little. Yihan answered that she meant their bodies, that they had changed over the years. The girl became very embarrassed and repeated that their bodies had changed, and that it was the first time in her life she had ever seen a man's body. Chioh was very surprised. No one had ever said anything like that to him before. The girl was embarrassed too, realizing she'd actually said that out loud to him. The guy asked what she meant by what she just said, but the girl replied that she needed to change the bed sheets. That would be better. She felt flustered and said she would go start the washing machine. If he needed anything, he should say so. She'd bring a new blanket later. Leaving the room with the bedding in her hands, the girl wondered why she had said any of that at all. She heard the guy laughing behind the closed door and wondered how long he would keep laughing at her before walking away. The guy said he might go crazy. But there she was, the same one. Awkward, clumsy, his little sister Jung Yihan. Then he looked at his long-sleeved clothes and said that apparently he had changed for nothing. The girl put the blanket into the washing machine and thought it really needed to be washed. But then she heard a strange noise. When she walked into the living room, she saw the guy and annoyed asked what he was trying to do. Chioh was holding a couch he had brought into the room and said he was moving furniture. The girl was very surprised. She had no idea where this couch even came from. Then she realized it was the couch from the guy's parents' house. But the guy said his mom told him he could take anything they needed. The girl didn't understand anything. He was supposed to stay only for a short time, so why was he dragging everything here? Chioh said that Grandma's place already has everything. Then he asked where to put the TV. Maybe across from the couch? But the girl stopped him. Chioh told her not to even think about helping him. She might get hurt, and then he'd have to take care of her. The guy set the TV across from the couch and said he needed to sweat it out before he could fall asleep. The girl looked at him and said she didn't mean that at all, not even close. After placing the TV down, the guy said everything was finally in its place, and the house was slowly coming to life. Seeing such a beautiful couch, the girl wondered what she would do once dust started collecting on it. And that flower in the pot on the table? If she didn't water it on time, it would wilt quickly. Filling something up always came with the risk of losing it someday. Leaving everything empty was easier. That way you didn't have to lose anything, or remember anything either. Chioh kept working, arranging the room with great enthusiasm, unlike the girl, who looked completely helpless. Ihan was exhausted from constantly thinking. She went to her room and closed the door. The guy grew tired from working, and then glanced at the girl who had gone to her room. He didn't understand what was wrong. The clock on the living room wall showed almost 5 o'clock. Chioh had already finished arranging the room. The girl lay in her bed and thought that the guy just wanted to feel at home while he was living there, because that was normal. Jung Yihan felt like a fool. She asked herself what problems a couple of things and pieces of furniture could possibly cause. That was exactly why she hadn't wanted to live with him. When she was little, she once asked her mom if she really had to go that day because she thought she had a fever. Her mom apologized and said her brother had an important competition, and she needed to take him there herself. There was nothing she could do about it. The little girl told her mom she was sick, yet all she talked about was him. Maybe she loved him more. But her mom said that was nonsense. Her mom always said she loved both her children equally. And maybe it was true that she simply didn't spend enough time with her. Then she apologized to her daughter. Her mom felt her forehead and said the fever wasn't high, so everything was fine. And if the girl wanted, she would buy her something tasty on the way. The little girl thought for a moment and said she wanted a cake. In reality, asking for a cake from the city center was her small, childish revenge. She just wanted her mom to think about her, even for a minute, on the way home. Her mom asked if today was some special occasion to buy a cake, because cakes were for special days only. The girl told her mom that today her brother would win a gold medal, and she would get better. So it really was a good day. And her mom promised she would grant her wish. The girl woke up and felt upset because she had seen the same dream again. She sat up, resting her head on her knees. It felt painful and unpleasant. She had remembered that day again. That day truly turned out just as she had said. A good one. Her brother won gold, and she recovered while waiting for them. And her mom remembered the girl's request. She didn't forget about the cake. At least until the accident. If she hadn't asked for the cake that day, they would still be with her now. Had her childish resentment taken away 2 of the people she loved most? Sitting on the bed, the girl thought that she wanted Chioh to forgive her, because she didn't want this house to fill up. If she became happy here, she would feel ashamed in front of her mom and brother. But then, looking at the photo on her bedside table, the one with her, Chioh, and his parents, she hesitated. After all, when Chioh was in her home, she couldn't help feeling happy. Then the girl looked at the clock, wondering how long she had slept. The laundry had probably finished a long time ago. Leaving her room, she thought her oppa must have done everything by himself. She apologized and said she hadn't noticed when she fell asleep. Looking around the room, the girl was surprised by how beautifully the guy had arranged it. When she went to the laundry room, she saw that he had even hung up the blanket to dry. Then she noticed the front door was open and figured Chioh must have stepped out somewhere. The girl didn't want to stay inside either, so she decided to go up to the roof to get some fresh air. Outside it was dark and cold. She froze so much her head cleared instantly. She stood there deep in thought, her mind filled with different memories. Then she remembered the upcoming anniversary of her mom's and brother's death, and then she noticed a guy standing outside the building. For a moment, something about it felt strange. The guy standing out there looked a bit like her brother. The girl tried to look closely and wondered, could it be Yi-jun? In rare moments, she imagined what her brother Yi-jun would be like if he were still alive. Maybe he would be taller than her by now. Maybe he would still smile with his eyes. And his voice, maybe it would have stayed the same. Ihan wondered if he would have become a professional judoka or taken a completely different path. Looking at the guy outside, he looked exactly like the version of her brother she had always imagined. The girl closed her eyes, trying to pull herself together. She knew this happened to her every year before the anniversary. This wasn't the first time. It seemed like the guy waved at her. But she thought that if she blinked, he would disappear. She looked up at the starry sky, and even as she ran down the stairs, deep inside she already understood. It was just an illusion. Running after him was pointless. She ran, thinking that just once, just one more time, she wanted to make sure. She started calling out for her brother. Outside, she ran into Chioh. Seeing Jung Yihan, he said she really knew how to make people worry. The guy was holding a bag of food. He thought she hadn't looked sick earlier, and maybe this would cheer her up. And even if she refused, she would definitely eat it later. It seemed she had gotten overwhelmed when he moved the furniture without warning. He must have rushed. Before the anniversary, she reacted more sensitively to everything. And all he did was make her worry even more. Chioh thought they should go back home so he could try to calm her down, because he was truly worried about her. Then he saw Yihan running down the street and wondered what she was even doing out here. Had she really run outside to look for him? But could anyone really go out in the middle of winter dressed so lightly? The guy called out to her and said he was there. The girl was just walking down the street, not reacting to anything. She looked very strange, dressed lightly, even barefoot on one foot. Chioh approached her and stopped her, then told her to look at herself and asked what had happened while he was away. He touched her face and asked if she had caught a cold, and asked her to let him take a look at her. Chioh looked at her worriedly, unable to understand what was going on. Ihan asked if he had perhaps seen a guy nearby. He tried to recall if someone had passed by, and maybe the guy hadn't noticed. But Cho didn't seem to have met anyone on his way. He tried to find out from Yihan who it could have been, and said he would bring him here himself. The girl looked very upset and tried to explain to Chioh that she had seen her brother Yi-jun. He was very surprised to hear what the girl said, then said he understood. It was probably just someone who looked similar. Yihan began crying hard and said she just wanted to see him one more time, because no matter how much she searched, she couldn't find him. She leaned against the guy and said she understood and that it was time to stop, but she didn't know how to do it. Chioh asked her if she realized this, since her hands were clutching him, but her thoughts were still with someone else. And how far could he go to calm her down? First, he touched her head with his hand, then said that there was nothing wrong with not knowing how to stop. Chioh took the sneaker off his own foot and put it on her, then said that not being able to let someone go doesn't make her foolish. And if she wanted to keep searching, she could. But he would always be by her side. Then he lifted his head, looked at her, and asked her not to deceive herself. Jung Yi-jun was not the one she needed to look for. She had to let him go. Then he looked her in the eyes and told her she shouldn't torment herself by asking how much longer she should continue searching. She needed to calm down, try to move on, and finally begin to accept that her brother would never return. Looking down, the girl noticed she was wearing her oppa's sneaker. It was big and uncomfortable, but just seeing it calmed her slightly. The guy took her hand and suggested they go home, but she wondered why he was holding her. Perhaps he was afraid she might run away. On the way home, the girl asked where he had gone. The guy thought that finally she had become curious. At first, he was confused, then remembered he had gone to buy bungopang and hurriedly shoved it into his pocket. After all, when Yihan was a child, she had waited through the winter just for that. Though now, winter probably had other associations for her. When the girl took it in her hands, Chioh said it was fine. He would buy a new one tomorrow, and this one could just be thrown away. The girl took a bite, but the guy tried to stop her and asked why she was doing it. She replied that she hadn't had it in a long time. It was so delicious, and it was still warm. Then she said with joy and a smile that she was very glad they were like one family, and that she loved him very much. The guy thought that she was talking nonsense. But so began their new daily life. Although she quickly realized that living together required far more preparation than it seemed. For example, "What are you thinking?" the guy asked, standing in front of the completely empty refrigerator. She rarely ate at home and hadn't thought that the fridge needed to be filled. Now, apparently, she would have to think about that, too. She told the guy there was no other choice. Breakfast would just be ramen, since there was plenty there, and he could choose whatever he wanted. Chioh called his mom and said Yihan only ate ramen, but the girl told him to wait and that she would quickly go get groceries. He told the girl that later they could go together to the store, but for now, so she wouldn't worry, he would order delivery himself. The guy quickly called and arranged the delivery. A few minutes later, it was already outside their house. The courier said that finally it was this house, and how difficult it had been to see her, since he still couldn't forget the first day he had brought an order to this house. The first time the courier brought an order, an incredibly pretty girl opened the door, and he really liked her. Since then, he always looked forward to the day she would place an order again so he could come back. The girl always ordered food just for herself, and he had never heard any other sounds from the house. Did she really live alone in such a large home? The courier thought it was dangerous nowadays for a girl to live alone, since he couldn't come by every day to keep an eye on her. What if someone suspicious started hanging around her? But the door was opened by a young, handsome guy who greeted him. Chioh stood there, looking at the courier with an unreadable expression. The courier could only stare back at him suspiciously. The guy asked what had happened, and the courier replied that everything was fine, then wondered if the girl had moved. Looking into the house, the courier said he remembered that the girl had lived there alone before. Chioh smiled, looked at the courier suspiciously, then said that he understood everything. Hearing the courier's voice, the girl wondered why Oppa was standing there and asked him what had happened. The courier tried to enter the house to see if she really lived there, then asked what was going on, since she really did live there. Chioh smiled at the courier and replied that now the girl didn't live there alone. The guy entered the room carrying the delivery and said she had been ordering delivery very often lately. The girl replied that it wasn't true. He placed the box of food on the table and looked at Yihan strangely. The girl pretended to be very surprised. She said she ordered at most once a month, and even then, only when busy with school and having no time to cook. Then she asked why he suddenly asked about it. The girl asked if something had happened. The guy explained that the courier said she no longer lived alone and asked how he had found out. The courier explained to Chioh that he had just said it casually, without meaning anything. She was a regular customer, and he just wanted to check how she was doing. Then wondered why he was even defending himself. Then he said that it was generally unsafe to live alone nowadays. The guy replied that there were already enough dangers, even those who intrude with unwanted concern. He took the delivery bag from the courier, thanked him for his concern, wished him well, and then closed the door. Chioh got a little annoyed, then said it was nothing when the girl showed him the note attached to the order, which said to leave the delivery at the door, and she said she had already started worrying. Chioh looked at the girl strangely and told her, by the way, not to prove something again. but the girl still didn't understand what he meant. The girl got upset and asked what he wanted to say, then wondered if something had happened to his face. Was he really that hungry? The guy's expression didn't change. He looked carefully at the girl, then told her not to order delivery anymore when she was home alone. Yihan asked why, and he replied that delivery was expensive now, and paying for the service was wasteful. Then he said to wait a moment and went to the bathroom. Ah, that's why, the girl thought. It was already lunchtime. He was probably terribly hungry. Next time, she would need to buy groceries in advance. She took the delivery in her hands, put it on the table, and opened the bag. It looked very tasty and appetizing. Then she noticed her outfit and saw that she wasn't wearing underwear under her pajamas. But the pajamas were thick enough, so she thought it wasn't a problem and that Chioh probably didn't notice. Still, she resolved to be more careful in the future. The guy was still in the bathroom, and he couldn't stop thinking about whether she really ordered food every morning. Yihan wished Oppa a good meal, and he said that if she had eaten, she could go to her room. But the girl said that if he had bought everything, she could at least clean up. Nevertheless, the guy ordered her to go. Chioh said that after the morning delivery, there was a heaviness in his stomach. He would move a bit and wash the dishes, and the girl agreed. The girl looked a little upset, thinking that from the very beginning he hadn't even glanced at her. Perhaps he didn't like the food, and now she could only think about that. But then she decided at least to clean the table. By chance, she noticed the receipt for the delivery on the table. The amount was quite large. The girl thought that it was only the two of them eating, and almost 50,000 won was gone. On her way to her room, she thought that utility bills would probably double too, since living with someone immediately affects expenses. She sat at her desk, picked up her phone, and saw that her aunt even helped with tuition payments. And when school starts, expenses would only increase, although for her birthday she should still have some money left. Then Yihan's phone rang. It was her aunt. She asked the girl what she was doing and whether she had eaten yet. She was very happy to hear her aunt's voice and said that she had just eaten with Chioh, then asked if they had eaten too. Her auntie replied that they had just finished eating as well and were very happy to hear Yihan's voice. Then she explained that they had been busy moving since morning and hadn't had any rest. She asked if anything had happened with Chioh last night, and the girl replied that everything was fine. The woman asked if it really was so, noticing a trembling in her voice. Then she thought of Han Chioh, that scoundrel, wondering what he could have done to Yihan during the night. But Yihan reassured them, saying everything was really fine and that nothing had happened, so they shouldn't worry. The girl knew her auntie would worry, so she couldn't tell her the whole truth. The woman said that if nothing had happened, then everything was fine. Auntie said that hearing her voice made her want to hug the girl even more, then said that soon her uncle would come to see her. She also said that she wanted not only to hear her voice, she had just sent money for expenses and asked if Ihan had received it. The girl didn't understand what money she was talking about. Since she was now living with Chioh, expenses had increased. His mother wanted the girl not to worry and to use the money freely. But the girl said it was too much. The woman said they would continue sending money regularly. Then she said they were going to finish their tasks and would call in the evening, and that they loved her very much. After talking to her aunt, Yihan thought about it and realized it wasn't the right time. Then she took her notebook from the shelf. She took a pen and began writing down her plans in her book. Living expenses with Chioh, the money had been transferred again, everything seemed fine, but she must return both the money and the care. Yihan was very responsible and couldn't allow herself to accumulate more debt. She thought she would have to look for a part-time job. Chioh came out of the bathroom, drying himself with a towel. He said that he finally felt lighter and wondered how Jung Yihan had managed to live like that before. Toilet paper scraps, bits for origami, shampoo, and toothpaste. She gathered everything carefully, acting as if everything was fine. He was amazed by her. If breakfast was finished, he thought, they could go get groceries. But then he saw the girl was already running late. The guy asked Ihan where she was rushing. The girl saw Chioh and stopped, holding a hair tie in her teeth. She tried to tie her hair and said she was late for a part-time job interview. The hair tie fell to the floor, and she tried to pick it up. She thought, honestly, There's never a moment of peace. The guy didn't understand why she decided to find a part-time job. Ihan said there was still time before the semester began, and she thought to start looking for one now. His mother had said she sent money for expenses, but the girl explained it wasn't about that. She thought it wasn't that there was too little money, rather the opposite. There was too much, and that was the problem. She felt pathetic receiving money she hadn't earned, as if it were supposed to be that way. If she told him, he would immediately worry. The girl said she now had to earn her own living. The guy was very surprised, then placed his hand on her head and told her to turn back. The girl didn't understand why he was doing that, or why he was touching her hair, but the guy told her to stand still. Thinking about it, in childhood her hair was always braided, not by her aunt, but by Chioh. Even if his clumsy hands messed up her hair, she still liked it. And now his hands had grown so big. Now his touches were completely different from her memories. Cool, confident, and somehow foreign. The past seemed like a strange movie, and the present so fake and uncomfortable. Perhaps he also missed that little girl who had asked him to braid her hair back then. While tying her hair, the guy thought she still had the same shampoo scent. He wondered if Jung Yihan realized that he didn't just want to tie her hair. Chioh smiled and said it was done. The girl was very flustered and nervous, then said she needed to go. The guy hugged her shoulders and asked if she could just stay without going anywhere. The girl thought that today he seemed strange. Chioh was indeed acting strangely, and both his voice and expression were different from usual. But the girl thought that she herself was also acting strangely. After all, they had only lived together for a day, and maybe she was overreacting. The guy asked if she would stay if he asked. The look on his face, which she had never seen before, had no hint of a joke. Such a familiar face suddenly seemed foreign. He said it so unusually seriously that she couldn't just brush it off with a smile. His words hung in the air as if they held another meaning. At that moment, the boundaries in their relationship began to blur. The girl didn't know how to respond. She said that she had deliberately worn new clothes today, but he didn't understand what she meant. He listened carefully as she explained that she had worked so hard to arrange the expenses. Maybe it was still worth going, wasn't it? She looked at him so intently, and in her gaze, there was determination to leave no matter what he said. Chioh leaned forward and covered his face with his hands, then told her to go, preferably far away, and started laughing loudly. But she said it wasn't fun that way. When he raised his head, Ihan asked what he wanted to tell her. But he replied that he was simply bored and wanted her to stay home with him. The girl was surprised and said she thought he wanted to have a serious conversation. But he said, "Isn't she pitying such a poor student sitting at home alone, without friends or classmates?" Ihan thought that it was as usual, and maybe she had just overreacted. Then she asked if he was serious. She started laughing and said that he asked with such a face that she almost changed her mind. Then she began putting on her coat and said that if she stood there any longer, she would be late, and once she finished, she would message him so he wouldn't worry. She opened the door and left, telling him they would see each other later, and thanked him for helping with her hairstyle. Chioh didn't say anything in response. He was very surprised, but thought that she had just smiled and left. Ihan arrived at the cafe. Probably because it was her first interview, she was more nervous than she expected. She just needed not to stumble or make herself look foolish. She opened the cafe door and wondered why she was panicking when nothing had even started. She greeted and said she had an interview scheduled for 2 hours, thinking that no matter what, she had to try. A few days ago, Ihan had already attended interviews and had been rejected everywhere. She was very upset about it. At first, she tried to get a job at a cafe that strictly required a barista certificate and work experience. Then she tried to get a job at a small restaurant, but there she would have to clean the grills and serve guests. They told her she physically wouldn't be able to manage it. She also tried to work at a 24-hour convenience store. But even there, they said that since she was only there for the holidays, she would leave eventually. If she came without a labor contract and for minimum wage, then it could work. She thought that job hunting was quite a challenge. The announcement said that no experience was needed, and the applicant's gender didn't matter. Ihan was really nervous because her previous attempts to find work had failed. But suddenly, her phone rang. It was Chioh calling to ask how her interview went. She replied that she was sitting in a cafe drinking coffee as there was still time, but she could tell from his face that he had called just to tease her. He told her that she wouldn't get the job anyway and that she should stop all these antics and return home, as he was bored being alone. The girl smiled confidently and said that today, everything would definitely work out for her, and previously she had just been unlucky. The guy was surprised by her confidence, smiled, and asked where her interview was today. She asked if he remembered the Inni building, where a new board game club had opened. Chioh smiled and said that classes would start soon anyway, so there was no rush to find work. The girl agreed, but indeed, soon she would be overwhelmed with responsibilities. Maybe it wasn't worth overexerting herself yet. Especially if she wanted to find something long-term in her field, her confidence slightly waned. The guy told her not to overthink it, but the girl thought that at first he seemed indifferent, and now he was encouraging her, since she knew he would change. She said that it was also time for him to think about himself. He told her that she had only been in high school and had never really had fun. He just wanted her to start living genuinely at university, without unnecessary worries. He would cover most of her expenses, and she didn't need to worry about money. The girl smiled and thanked Chioh. She said that even if she was rejected today, she would keep looking calmly and without fuss. The girl said she should go now. Chioh told her to wait, but she thanked him for caring and hung up. The guy looked at his phone screen and thought that just now it seemed she had distanced herself, and sometimes it felt like an invisible wall between them was getting higher. They had been together for years, and he thought he understood her at least a little, that it was just an illusion. Jung Yihan only shows what she wants him to see. Everything else, she doesn't intend to reveal. The girl walked down the street thinking that she wouldn't mind living for herself a little, but she was afraid that if she let herself go, everything would just collapse. Earlier, when her friends met her on the street, they would always call her to go somewhere and spend time together. Once again, when her friends met her, they said they were going to karaoke and invited her to join. But the girl didn't want to go anywhere at all. She apologized and said that if she stayed out too long, people at home would worry, and she promised to go next time. Her friends thought that Ihan had refused again, but she wouldn't have gone anyway. Why even ask her in the first place? But a friend told everyone that they had no idea what her situation was, so they felt sorry for her. The girl thought that her task was simply to live calmly so that Chioh and the others wouldn't worry about her. The main thing was not to forget that it was her choice. Then she heard a message on her phone. She thought it was Chioh, but it wasn't. It was information about the interview at the board game club. They said the location had changed, and she needed to go to the office on the ground floor because of renovations. The girl was very surprised. She quickly chose a route and arrived at the destination. Opening the office door, Ihan greeted them. In the office, a very stern-looking man greeted her and asked what she needed there. Seeing him, the girl thought, could this really be the manager? The girl approached and greeted him again, then said she had an interview scheduled for 4 p.m. But another man entered the office, and seeing the girl, asked if she was really student Jung Yihan. The man said he saw that she had arrived early, as he was in charge of the place. The interview would take place inside, and invited her to go to another room. Ihan thanked him, and thought it was good that such a polite man would be conducting the interview. The other man in the room gave them a strange look. The girl thought everything was fine, and that this time she really should manage. Walking down the corridor, she thought that the office layout was strange. The corridor was narrow. Rooms were tightly next to each other, like in a cheap dormitory. The man said that their office was a bit old, but the girl replied that it was fine. Then she wondered what had been here before. Then he invited the girl into one of the rooms and said that the interview would be held here. Ihan was surprised. The man apologized and said that the renovations were taking longer, so they had to move the interview here, and he hoped for her understanding. The girl said it was fine and asked if she could sit, but thought it looked a bit strange. The man suggested they begin and told her not to worry. Ihan thought the critical moment had finally arrived. He told her not to take things too seriously. He would just ask her a few questions, and she should think of it as a normal conversation. His calm tone actually reassured her. He asked if this was her first part-time job. With her friends and personal plans, would she really be able to work on weekends? She replied that she barely had any friends and had plenty of free time, so everything was fine. Then he said she was a very pleasant girl and that she would have no problem dealing with clients. The conversation flowed easily, and the interview ended sooner than she expected. The man said it was rare nowadays to meet such polite and quiet young people like her, and then added that he liked her. He asked if she was satisfied and whether she would like to work for them. She had worried things would fail again, but she was very happy about the offer. She thanked him and promised to do her best, and the man seemed pleased. She admitted she simply wanted to find a part-time job as quickly as possible, so she was very nervous. Then he mentioned that she wrote in her resume that she studies at a university with high tuition costs, so it must be difficult for her parents. Ihan replied that she has no parents, though she receives some help, but from now on, she has to manage on her own. The man apologized, saying he probably shouldn't have said that, but she assured him it was okay and told him not to worry. He agreed and said that everyone has their own circumstances. Then he paused and added that, honestly, he thought he had a job that might suit her even better. Hearing about a better job surprised her and even made her happy. She asked what kind of job it was. The man replied that he doesn't offer this to everyone, but he thought her calm and reserved nature would appeal to clients. The girl felt that something was off. He said it was very simple, something like having an honest conversation. Ihan was confused again. Nothing special, he said. Just pour a drink for a guest and chat with him a little. No special skills required. That's why many female students do it. He added that nowadays it's better to choose an easy job with good pay rather than work hard for minimum wage, right? He suggested she think of it as an interesting experience. But she apologized and said she would pretend she hadn't heard anything. The girl said she should probably go. But he replied that everyone says that at first, and then they quickly get used to it. As he chased after her in the hallway, he admitted it was a somewhat specific job. Ihan began to feel afraid. What frightened her wasn't how easily he calculated her situation, claiming she had caught his attention, but the fact that others had done the same, crossing boundaries the moment they learned about her background. He said, "Just look at you, such a beauty." She stood there again, miserable and wounded, and in the middle of the familiar collapse inside her mind, only one name surfaced. While the man kept urging Ihan to consider the new job, she suddenly heard strange footsteps behind her. She turned and saw Chioh behind her. His face was strict and furious. Getting closer to the man, he told him to get his hands off his sister. Back then, Chioh didn't call her his little sister. They simply lived nearby. She was the younger sister of his friend, and he was a friend of her older brother. Nothing happened between them except occasional encounters. Until the day he walked into the office where she was having her interview. That was the first time he called her his sister. She still remembers the moment he told the man to take his hands off his little sister. Ihan was pleasantly surprised. She had never heard anything like that from Chioh before. His words felt like a shield. When Chioh walked into the office where the interview was taking place, she was shocked and couldn't understand how he knew she was there. While she was talking to the man in the hallway, Chioh noticed her hair was down and that the man was holding her hair tie. When the guy had tried to tie her hair, the band kept slipping because he hadn't twisted it properly. But he said that was why he was trying again. The guy wondered what other pain she had swallowed in silence while he wasn't there. Maybe anger, a feeling that grows quietly. Chioh said this was a strange place for an interview, and that there wasn't a single board game club in the building. No signs, no cameras, just a basement with nothing resembling an office. Anyone would call it a trap, not an interview. Then the guy demanded the man explain how the object in his hand had anything to do with an interview. The man said her boyfriend clearly thought their office was too shabby and got suspicious. He warned that picking a fight with the wrong person could cause trouble. Then he claimed this wasn't what they thought and told the guy not to worry. The man said he had only exchanged a few words with Ihan. The guy was surprised, and the man kept repeating her name. Chioh told him not to say her name so casually because it irritated him. The man hesitated, then said Yihan's boyfriend was overreacting. He told Yihan that this is why kids without families are in danger. They cling to anyone nearby just to feel supported. In her situation, he said, such people must seem like family. He had seen how guys use girls and then leave, pretending to care at first, but once they realize they owe nothing, they disappear. Looking at the guy, he said that people like him cling to others only as long as necessary for their own survival. Then he told her to pull herself together and think carefully about where she truly belongs. Chioh thought, what a bastard. But the girl stopped him and said she was fine, and that he shouldn't let the man's words provoke him. She hadn't expected it to help, but she told the man things seemed suspicious from the beginning, so she had recorded their conversation. She suggested ending this right away. She said he had already said enough. But there was no recording, and she worried that if she stumbled even once, he would realize she was lying. Her whole body trembled and she couldn't force out a single word. She didn't know what to do, but Chioh took her hand and said she was doing great. His words weren't concern. They were a way to belittle her under the guise of good intentions. She must not waver. She told the man that he was the one who needed to pull himself together. It wasn't the right moment for him to worry about others. He yelled at her, asking how she dared lecture adults when she didn't even understand the trouble she was in. She answered that having no family does not mean she clings to the first person who appears. She knows that love and compassion shouldn't be given to just anyone. Then, looking at him, she said it wasn't the building that was shabby. It was the way he looked at people. The girl and the guy turned and walked away. She told him that if he wanted to say something, he should think twice. Because if he said even one word, she would call the police. She turned back and proudly said that if he wanted to find out where his place really was, he should go ahead and continue. Chioh and Ihan went outside. The guy smiled and asked if she was okay. She replied that the grip of fear had released and her legs could hold her again. He offered to carry her in his arms, but she said it was fine. It wasn't that serious. Chioh smiled and told her she looked completely different back there. In a good way, of course. Such a convincing lie in that situation. She replied that she had only acted that way because of him. She had been very scared. Ihan remembered how he had told her she was doing great. That gave her confidence. Then she asked how he knew she was in the basement of that building, since she had only mentioned she would be in Innie's building. But he told her not to ask, because he had suffered enough over it. Time passed and the girl didn't contact him. He started to worry and went looking for her. In the building she mentioned, there was no club at all, so he searched all around, thinking maybe she gave the wrong address. Then he ended up near that building again. He was surprised and didn't know where to look for Yihan. Chioh said he wasn't exactly sure. He just decided to go downstairs, since it couldn't hurt. When the girl entered the office, there was a man at the entrance. She asked if the guy had met him. Chioh first thought for a moment, then said that when he came, there was no one there. She exhaled and said, "Thank God." The guy was upset and said, "Are you seriously relieved? If the interview location changed, you should have told me. I searched everywhere because of you, and you say, 'Thank God.'" Yihan apologized, saying it wouldn't happen again. Still, his guidance somehow reassured her. Perhaps he was her only oppa. The guy was surprised and asked what she meant. Then he thought, all right, she was probably scared too, and he apologized. But she thanked him for worrying and smiled. He asked Jung Yihan why she told that man she had no family. She didn't even know how to answer. Let it be just words, but why so cold? And do you think I was around all these 10 years just to hear this? Then he smiled. The guy was very upset and said that if their parents had heard this, how would they have reacted? Does she really think that? The girl thought about what she had done and mentally urged herself to quickly say it wasn't true. But when she was little, she had always thought that he never really considered her family. The guy and the girl stood on the street facing each other in silence. She still couldn't find words to explain why she said he wasn't her family. Late at night, Chioh and Yihan returned home. Each immediately went to their own room to rest. Very tired, she lay on the bed and thought about the guy's words. How he said she had gone completely crazy, and why she hadn't said anything. Several days had passed since then, But she and Chioh hadn't really crossed paths, even though they lived under the same roof and even had dinner separately today. Nothing surprising, she had upset him. The guy was very upset and suggested going home. Lying on the bed, she thought she should apologize, but wondered what to say. Then she received a message on her phone. She was surprised and wondered who it could be. Taking the phone, she saw a message, an invitation from Hong Daeun to a chat. It was a chat for first-year students in the university's design department. She thought, do first-years really have their own chat? That's unusual. The chat invited them to a Saturday party with drinks, to meet at least a little. But she remembered that Sunday was the anniversary of her mother and brother's death, and said she couldn't come due to personal reasons. However, when Saturday evening came, she went to the party, where many first-year students were constantly chatting, meeting, and discussing which club they planned to join. She shyly sat at a table and continued listening to her classmates' conversations. Everyone was having fun and enjoying themselves. Usually, on the eve of the anniversary, she felt uneasy and stayed home. But today she came here to avoid irritating Chioh even more. She hadn't even warned him, just went. She thought that maybe staying here would help her stop overthinking. She constantly remembered her mother's words, apologizing, and asking if she wanted something tasty. When she was little, she said she wanted a cake. Her mother promised she would come back and buy it for her. A girl sitting next to her asked if she was okay. Ihan said she was fine, just embarrassed since it was her first time in such a place. She said they were probably all here for the first time, so she shouldn't worry. Then she offered a drink. The girl said her name was Hong Daeun. Jung Yihan also introduced herself, took the glass, and wondered if she was holding it correctly. Hong Daeun offered friendship. Ihan held a glass of alcohol, even though it was her first time trying it. Ihan and her new friends started drinking, and she thought maybe it was the effect of just one glass. She woke up and didn't understand if this was her room. She remembered drinking at the cafe and wondered how she ended up here. She felt someone's hand touch her hair and asked who it was, because she couldn't understand what was happening. When she came to, she saw Chioh in front of her, who said he had brought her here. Yihan was surprised by his words. 2 hours ago, Yihan was still at the club with her classmates. They were having a lot of fun, sharing interesting stories. Hong Dun offered her another drink. She refused, thinking she hadn't even drunk properly, yet already felt overwhelmed. She thought alcohol would lift her mood, like in movies or dramas. But apparently, not always. She wanted to have fun, drink, talk. But the more she drank, the worse her headache became. She thought that maybe it was because tomorrow was the anniversary of her mother and brother's death that she felt so uneasy. She felt awkward, like a stranger among her peers. She wanted to join the conversation, but it was so noisy she couldn't hear anything. One guy, apparently named Taewon, said that if she felt uncomfortable, they could step outside for some fresh air. But she didn't hear him because of the noise. He then said she should sit closer to him. He whispered to her that she seemed a little tipsy and suggested going outside together. But the girl sitting next to her asked what they were doing. Then everyone noticed and said it seemed like a couple had appeared in their department and someone had started flirting. But Yihan denied it, saying it wasn't like that. She just couldn't hear well. Some guy said she was probably drunk. She wondered what to do, since everyone might misunderstand. Then Hong Daeun asked if everyone knew that there was such a handsome upperclassman in their department. One girl said that even just the shadow of a handsome guy would make her happy, and laughed. A guy replied that he had also heard he was a real star, surely from someone who studied with him in school. Yihan thought that thanks to Daeun, the topic had quickly changed. They continued talking that the guy was an outstanding student in their department, but right after enrollment, he went to the army, so now he was considered a first year. The girl was... He had only been to university a couple of times, yet everyone was already talking about him. Wow, he must be really handsome, Daeun said. She had only seen him in photos, but he was truly a good-looking guy. And what was his name? Ihan had a vague feeling that she knew him. Then Daeun pointed to a guy sitting nearby and said, "There he is." Han Chioh was a tall blonde with a very attractive face. Tall in height, but his gaze was a little intimidating. Someone asked why they came so late, but the guys replied that it was a first-year party. Why were they even invited? And they went to another table. The girls, seeing Chioh, started discussing how handsome he was, though slightly intimidating. Someone called the upperclassman who came, but he was also a first year, just like them. The girls greeted the sunbae, and Ihan was very surprised and confused, wondering what Chioh was doing there. She wondered what to do, since she hadn't told him she would come. If he noticed her, he would surely be angry. She thought that maybe before he noticed, she should go and greet him separately. But her friend asked where she was going. Ihan told her she was just going to get some water, thinking that he probably didn't hear her. He heard her. She had intentionally gone so he could spend time at home in peace, hoping he wouldn't get upset. The guy silently looked at her, and she thought she would just greet him first and then say something. But she couldn't explain anything. Chioh just silently turned away, as if he didn't care at all what she was doing or why she hadn't said where she was going. She didn't understand anything since he pretended not to know her. Her friend approached and offered water, then asked what happened and if she was okay, since she had suddenly gone pale. But she replied that she was fine. Well, I guess that's how he decided to act, she thought, returning to the table where Taewon suggested ordering something cold. He smiled and said no, everything was fine. Then she thought that several days had passed and she still hadn't apologized. Strange, to just approach and talk in front of people? Still, it was a little embarrassing. Her classmates, seeing Han Chioh, said, "How long has it been? So many years!" They laughed and said they couldn't wait, but the friends were surprised that he remained silent. They asked what happened. He replied nothing, suggesting they just sit quietly and drink. He drank a glass of alcohol and thought that she had been ignoring him since that day, and now she came here without saying a word. He left so as not to cause her unnecessary worry before the anniversary. She hadn't even greeted him and even tried to run away. How cruel. He felt very hurt. Just look at her. She seemed completely fine, enjoying herself as if nothing had happened, probably pretending at university that she didn't know him. The guys asked Han Chioh why he secretly poured for himself. How could he not even call once after returning from the army? But one of the guys said not to ask, since he had dragged him here. Then the guys said that the whole thing was about his younger sister. Someone asked if he really had a sister and why he stayed silent. Probably because she was very young. She was already 20, grown up, so why was he so protective that he didn't even leave home? Was he completely crazy? But that wasn't the point. They asked if his little sister was really that beautiful. Chioh replied that she was extremely beautiful. The guys said he was sly and asked to see a photo. Ihan sat silently, barely taking her eyes off Chioh. Taewon asked if she was okay, since she seemed drunk. She looked at the guy, smiling with his friends. Thinking he looked so happy, she thought, "Forgive me, Oppa. That day it wasn't that I was deliberately holding back my words, thinking as a child that he never considered her family." She knew he felt responsible for her, so she didn't want to add a heavy burden to his heart, never imagining it would cause him pain. The guys said Chioh still hadn't shown a photo of his sister. He said it had been deleted. Ihan looked at him, thinking that he smiled like that with his friends, not paying attention. Then thought he should forgive his sister. After a while, Chioh noticed that the girl had drunk a lot with her friends and wasn't sober. He lifted her onto his shoulder and tried to carry her to her room. When she didn't want to get off or let go, he said, she should remember that she had let him in herself. When she woke up, she saw Chioh stroking her hair. She felt very happy that it was him. Chioh didn't leave her for a moment, always staying close. A smile appeared on his face when he saw her regain some composure. She rubbed her eyes, then asked when she had returned home. The guy told her that she had suddenly started staggering and headed for the exit, and he had been very scared. Ihan said she didn't remember anything and probably scared everyone. He replied that's why you should drink in moderation. She asked what happened next, and Chioh said he carried her home on his back. She said she remembered all of it vaguely and smiled. He asked why she was laughing, but she didn't answer. Ihan held Chioh's hand. He told her to sleep and they would talk tomorrow. But she said she didn't want to wait. The guy couldn't understand anything, but the girl hugged him and said she needed to talk to him. She looked at Chioh strangely, smiling constantly, saying they hadn't really talked properly for several days. The guy agreed with her, then thought that it might be time to control alcohol consumption. Then she touched his hand and asked if he remembered that day. He asked which day, and she replied the day he first called her sister. That was probably when she was in 2nd grade. It had been raining non-stop for more than a week. She had been alone at home for several days, and he saved her. She asked if he remembered what he said then. As a child, he said he would love her even more than her mom and dad, and everything would be fine. Even now, it seemed like a miracle how he could say exactly the words she needed so much at that time. After that, she remembered almost nothing. Probably just relaxed and passed out from exhaustion. She only remembered how hard he was breathing carrying her on his back, and how raindrops occasionally fell on her face. Then she smelled medicine sharply and woke up in the hospital, thinking only about the strange smell and oppa. The nurse, looking at the little girl, said that they should have called an adult, or at least a family member whose number he knows. But the boy cried and shouted that she was his sister and he was her brother. It was obvious to everyone. He begged them to save his sister. When the girl heard these words, she felt warmth and care, and would probably never forget that moment. In the end, it turned out to be something simple. She had just fainted from hunger. The girl said she wanted to eat, but felt very embarrassed in front of the boy and the nurse. She said that even now, whenever she remembers, she still feels hungry. Although later, the aunt and uncle fed her as much as she wanted, she didn't know why she still felt that way. She wasn't sure if he remembered that day himself. Then she hugged his hand more tightly and said, "I'm sorry for what happened a few days ago." The guy covered the girl with a blanket, hugged her tighter, and said he remembered everything. That day when she became his sister. Because that day, he was the happiest. The phrase, "younger sister," is very convenient. It clearly shows how far he can go and where he should stop. But sometimes he caught himself thinking that the space next to him had just been empty, and she had taken it purely by chance. That she would be fine even without him. In the morning, when the sun's rays broke through the window, the girl woke up. She was surprised that morning had come so quickly. Ihan couldn't understand when she had fallen asleep. Next to her, Chioh was sleeping on the bed, holding her tightly. She was surprised and thought, could they have really fallen asleep like this after yesterday? She remembered that under the influence of alcohol, she had told him some stories from the past, and then nothing. And it was clear why. The guy had stayed by her side all evening. He said everything was fine. His hands, calming her before sleep, were very warm. For some reason, the girl felt very hot and thought she should wash up quickly before Oppa woke up. Otherwise, it would be awkward when they woke up like this. She tried to quietly get out of bed, but the guy mumbled something in his sleep and pressed her even closer. She thought she couldn't breathe, as he was still asleep. She wondered what to do and tried to be as careful as possible, as one would in such a family-like situation. The guy woke up because it was already dawn. He thought she was going to run away and wondered why he hadn't slept at all. Let her suffer too, he thought. He couldn't understand why her hands were trying to gently push him away. The guy pondered. The girl looked at him fearfully, and then asked if he was okay, and if he had woken up because of her. Ihan apologized and said she had just wanted to move him a little because it was very hard for her. The guy also apologized and said he understood, then thought that a little disaster almost happened. Chioh said that since they were already awake, they should get ready to go to the cemetery. The girl agreed. He smiled and asked if she had a hangover, and the girl said everything was fine. When Yihan went outside, the guy said they could leave if she was ready, but she said, "Just a moment," and was very surprised. She was surprised because she saw that her brother had a car. Chioh said that his father had left it, and since they lived together, it could be needed at any moment. He hadn't mentioned the car before. The girl asked, "Then what about Uncle without a car?" The guy replied that the car was with his mother, so she shouldn't worry and should get in. Chioh buckled her with a seatbelt and asked if she was worried about his driving skills. The girl said no, she just felt a little uncomfortable. The guy said she shouldn't worry about anything. His father had told him that if he ever drove other girls besides Yihan, he knew what his father meant. He said he would still only drive her. The guy told the girl they could leave now and that the journey would take about an hour. The girl agreed. On the way, the guy told Yihan again that he would still only drive her. The girl thought about it and felt very happy to hear this. He asked if she was listening, but the girl asked again what he had said. Chioh asked how she had slept last night. She replied that she had slept wonderfully, then thought that since early morning she had been thinking only about his words. Then she asked why he was asking. The guy said he was asking just because. Usually, on the eve of their anniversary, she slept badly, so he wanted to know if she was okay, especially after drinking. Then he thought that she was even beside him and didn't even know it. A lucky coincidence that she had slept well. The girl said she was fine. They drove through the city and talked. The girl said that she hadn't even had any dreams with him. Usually, when sleeping alone, she tossed and turned all night. But beside him, it was surprisingly comfortable. The guy thought he had probably asked in vain. Now she was completely silent, and he might drive quietly. Then she remained silent the whole way, looking out the window. For some reason, she felt very heavy inside and became sad. They arrived at the cemetery. The girl got out of the car and told the guy he drove wonderfully. The weather outside was windy, and Chioh asked if she was cold. But the girl said everything was fine and they could go. The place where her mother and brother rested hadn't changed, no matter how many seasons passed. It seemed to know that she would grow up and return there. They stood next to each other, feeling very sad and heavy-hearted. Perhaps that's why sorrow always lingers in this place. Yihan thought she hadn't seen her mother and brother in a long time. Chioh said he would go to the car because he forgot the flowers. The girl asked if she could go with him. The guy told her to stay there and that he would be quick. She thought he didn't have to let her be first every year. The girl stayed. She was very sad and apologized for not visiting often. She missed them very much. In front of her mother and brother, she always felt like a little girl, as if the sorrow hidden deep in her heart was bursting out again. She said that if they only knew what had happened to her all this time. Then she heard footsteps behind her. Ihan was surprised and thought, "Oppa came back so quickly?" Then she wondered if someone else had come besides her. An aunt approached Yihan and asked how she was doing. The girl was very surprised. The aunt said that it seemed they hadn't seen each other since she was in middle school, and she must be about 20 now, as so much time had passed. The aunt had always been a difficult person for her. Once they even lived together briefly but never got closer, because the aunt despised her more than anyone in the world. She always blamed the girl for the death of her mother and brother. On that terrible day for the girl, the aunt screamed that it all happened because of her. People tried to calm her, saying she shouldn't say such things to a child. She said she was already 20 and it was time to look for a job, since it wasn't easy to find a proper place now. The girl told the aunt that she had actually enrolled in university this year and apologized for not telling her earlier. The aunt was very surprised that the girl had entered university and asked where she got the money. Was she still living off that family? She had told her many times that those people just wanted to get her insurance payout. Wow. A kind intruder is truly an emotional roller coaster. Watching Ihan and Chioh navigate life under the same roof is both heartwarming and heart-wrenching. Their friendship, built on trust and shared memories, slowly evolves into something more, and the tension of unspoken feelings keeps you on edge throughout the story. What makes this manhwa so compelling is how it handles deep emotions, grief, guilt, care, and love, all intertwined in a way that feels real and relatable. Ihan's growth, Chioh's quiet protectiveness, and their gradual realization of what they mean to each other make every moment feel significant. This story beautifully shows that love can emerge in unexpected ways, that family is more than blood, and that sometimes the person you've known your whole life may hold your heart without you even realizing it. If you love emotional, slow-burn romances filled with depth and sincerity, this manhwa is an absolute must-read. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment sharing your thoughts on this story. I'd love to hear what you think.